So one of the most frequently asked questions I get is, what happened when you had this awakening? I heard it was something supernatural. And yes, I had a cataclysmic event. But let me just say, those of you that are going through your own spiritual awakening journey and you're really curious about other people's journey, I want to make sure that we realize that even though there usually is a really life-changing event that happens that kind of catapults us into this new way of being and this new level of consciousness, everything that happened to us, me included, you included, along the way on your life path, were stepping stones leading you up to your spiritual awakening. It all had purpose, even the challenging parts. Actually, very often the challenging parts have more of a purpose because they help you refine more of who you are. They help you learn how to be resilient and recover and maybe get closer to source and closer to the divine being that you were meant to be, even though life can be challenging. So when I was younger, maybe like you, actually always like you, let me just say, when we're born, we are actually born super connected to source. So every baby, including you when you were little, could see non-physical, could see spiritual beings. You can watch animals and babies, and they are still so connected to source because it hasn't been teased out of them, it hasn't been really brainwashed out of them, that they can still see spirits. Very, very often you'll hear about kids talking to their grandparents on the other side when they're in their cribs. A lot of times those baby monitors will pick up conversations happening. You can see dogs maybe looking at things that you can't see with your naked eye anymore. And so that's because when you're born innately connected to source and to the spirit world. And over time, you learn that your imaginary friends are not supposed to be there and that you're supposed to be this way and that way. And so most of us tend to kind of tease that out of our vernacular, of our innate gifts. And so as you spiritually awaken, you may rediscover some of those gifts like I have. Like when I was little, I had a knowing, and the reason I keep going back to you is because I don't think that I'm in any way like super special or that I have any gifts that anybody else doesn't have access to. It's just I've raised my hand to them later, now that I'm in an evolutionary stage of my awakening. But we all had so many when we're young. We're all born with them. We all have access to them. So when I was young, I remember specifically about the age of 6, I was outside of church. My mom was always in ministry, and there was this little Lutheran church in Tucker, Georgia, where I grew up. And I started making up this song. I just had this great connective feeling, and it was natural. That's the thing too, when you look back at these experiences when you're little, it doesn't seem like something out of the ordinary, right? But as you're telling it now in your like future life, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it seems like something extraordinary that stands out. But really, when you were young, it's just how it was supposed to be because you didn't know any different. You were connected to God in a way that was so pure. So in my pureness, I was standing outside the church in the front kind of courtyard area, and something just said, make up a song. And so I just started making up this song about love. And as I'm singing, there was just a knowing. It wasn't a voice that I heard, I don't think. If it was, I don't remember it because it was probably really normal. But something just let me know to look over these trees that were out in the field. And I saw about a dozen orbs of light flying over the trees, and it didn't scare me, nor did I think it was unnatural. I just had a knowing that they were angelic beings. I was like, there they are. Isn't that cool? And I remember watching them just for several minutes above the trees, and then just like that, they were gone. And I actually didn't remember that until years later, and then during my spiritual awakening, as I've looked back, I'm like, wow, like I was seeing angels, and there were probably many more times that all of us have seen or experienced angelic beings. We just don't remember it because we've kind of told ourselves it wasn't true. And so the memory leaves us. So I'm telling you that leading up to my story because it all part of the stepping stones. So I was also raised then in Lutheran church and then in evangelical church, specifically the Church of God. You know, while I don't hold a belief system that resonates with so many of the teachings I learned in the Church of God, all of it really informed my path. So leading up to my big spiritual awakening experience, I was raised in a church where the Holy Spirit was really present. There was laying on of hands. You know, now I know it's energy. Now I know it's energetic healing based on high consciousness and high frequency. Back then, I thought I needed a pastor to have his super electric magnetic hands lay on us. But, you know, as I've grown and learned, I realized, wow, like I was witnessing spiritual energy is what is causing or what is catalyzing all of those healings. But I was raised with a big comfort of it because of the Church of God. So again, stepping stones, right? It wasn't unusual for us to have a spontaneous healing or for someone to be dancing in the aisles or for all this crazy stuff, a lot of people thought, to happen. And my mom became a pastor. My parents always taught Sunday school. I taught Sunday school. So I have this foundation of the teachings of the church. So fast forward, I go and get my PhD, and I have this big mental awakening as I'm growing and evolving. And but between the ages of 30 and 40-ish in there, it took me about 10 years. In between, I got divorced, remarried, had 3 kids, ended up getting divorced again. But I had this mental awakening when I was going through my PhD, because the program I was in was very, for lack of a better word, liberal. There were a lot of people of different colors, of different identities, specifically LGBTQ in the department I was in. And I hadn't been exposed to a lot of that. Now, this is back around 2000 to 2010. That had not been so much a part of what I had been exposed to. At least the thinking wasn't, okay? The acceptance part wasn't. I was raised that people that were not, heterosexual and in this line of thinking, that they weren't going to heaven, there was a lot of very hard line truths that I learned growing up. So as I'm going through this program and I'm being exposed to this whole new world, and it was also a world that, there was a class on consciousness. There were all these classes on, just psychology and just more in diversity. There was a lot of teaching on diversity. I started waking up mentally. I started realizing there was much more to the world than my tiny little town in Tucker, Georgia, where everything was very black and white. It was a very hard-lined religious upbringing. You either were going to heaven or you weren't. There was no gray. What I started realizing was the world is full of shades of gray, full of shades of every color. And I started realizing my belief system now, I started questioning. It isn't what my belief system was growing up. There's much more to the world. Then you start traveling the world, right? Nothing changes you more than international travel. Because when you're exposed and immerse yourself in other cultures, you get this understanding that maybe things you were taught that were wrong, or the judgment that we pass on other cultures, there's something to it when you sit and really talk to people. So that's what was going on. I was training to be a counselor, so there was a lot of exploration with people of different identities and genders, and I started challenging my belief system that I mentally had downloaded before. I realized it wasn't a hardwired program, it was becoming a software program. So walking forward, the cataclysmic event happened in 2014 when someone extraordinarily close to me died in a really traumatic death. And I was exposed in that moment to something that totally changed me. And I'm not gonna go into all the details because it's not necessary for me to take a deep dive into, but I will just say it was a very dark experience. It was very traumatizing. And what ended up happening is I ended up being surrounded with all this dark energy that showed me that there were actually some dark forces in the world, that I had to learn how to cleanse myself from from attracting these. Because what happened was I just started opening myself up to other experiences that weren't in alignment with the new level of spirituality that I was trying to achieve, which was that of the light. So I started going to a shaman. I went to a medium because I couldn't find the answers to what I was experiencing. I was hearing voices. I was seeing shadows. I was feeling this darkness because this death energy and the trauma that I had experienced had attached to me. So, and there was actually some spiritual energy, specifically this loved one's energy was still attached to me. And I wanted to figure out how to get through whatever. I didn't even know the words to put on what I was experiencing. It wasn't lining up with what I was taught in the church as part of what life and death was supposed to be, right? Specifically, the shaman recognized, she sat there at lunch with me in Atlanta telling me, as I had lost 25 pounds, my hair was falling out, I looked like a shell of my former self. She's like, well, you're experiencing the energy of the death of this person that loved you. She wanted you to understand what she was experiencing, which was kind of a hell on earth, and that she wanted that you and she have a soul contract, that through this death, you are going to wake up to your spiritual gifts. And she really wanted to share this with you as part of your soul contract. And I was like, oh my gosh, this may make zero sense to any of you, but in the moment, it's the only thing that made sense to me. I could then explain what was happening to me on a soul level. I could understand then that all the energy that I was feeling was something that wasn't in alignment with the frequency I was trying to elevate myself to. But it was a purposeful experience because then I knew what dark energy felt like, right? So as I continued in my spiritual path, I realized how important it was to doing this spiritual work to protect myself, to line myself up with only those beings of the white light of God, to disallow anything that doesn't match my frequency. And in it, I ended up freeing her and freeing all of this energy from my energy field. And I realized that I had the ability to communicate with the other side. And she and other beings that had passed on together, now were in spiritual form, started communicating with me through visions, through a knowing, through speaking to my soul. And I started knowing things before they happened. I started hearing, not clairaudient is when you can hear, I would hear them in my knowing, if that makes sense. Like the word would pop up in my knowing, but it would be very clear like I was hearing it. And so I started getting training through a medium in Atlanta, Jamie Butler, who's amazing, who I've done work with now since 2014. And I started learning how to access those gifts in a way that was in alignment with what I really desired in my life, and that was to be in alignment with the white light of God, to be in alignment with my purpose. And in that cataclysmic event, I learned that my soul's calling would be what I'm doing here now, and you may have a similar calling on your life to then take some of your experience and turn that pain into something purposeful and use it then to help other people accelerate and activate their own spiritual awakening. And another gift that I realized that I had, which I believe we all have access to, is the gift of energetic healing. So when you think about energy work, you've probably heard the term Reiki Healing. I do believe that we all have, you can practice Qigong, where you practice with your Qi. There's all kinds of words you could put on it, but really manipulating and activating an essence, an energy field around you. And I realized that we could all channel Christ energy through us. You just ask for the ability to access that energy and to run healing energy through your body. So now I work on myself. I work with clients of mine on healing different parts of their body, different layers of their being, because the activation of this energy is one of an extreme love. It's a love of purity. It's a love of wholeness. It's a love where no disease exists. So that's another gift that came through, which is realizing, which is what I love to teach, the activation of this energy that you at any time can run through you and call into your body. Now, a big part of my awakening journey, and likely yours, is shedding the paradigm of things that no longer align with you, shedding the old paradigm that's based in fear, control, manipulation, shame, guilt, regret. All of those feelings are very low in the vibrational scale of consciousness. They should not and do not feel good to us on a conscious emotional level because they don't fit with who we innately are born to be. So any feeling, any experience, anything that you're bringing up as a memory that doesn't feel good to you, your body is telling you emotionally through your spiritual GPS, which is your emotions, it doesn't feel good to me. It feels heavy. It feels dense. This does not feel good because it does not match the lightness of being that I'm meant to be as a spiritual being on this planet. And as you're waking up, you more and more will want to surround yourself with experiences, just like me in my awakening process, experiences, people, goals that align with what and who you want to be. So I used to be a trained psychotherapist. There was a lot about the practice I was doing that no longer aligned with what I really thought people needed for healing. So I don't have the licensure anymore. I have a PhD, but to be honest, I really don't need it. The reason I needed it is because it helped me have that mental awakening. And I have a lot of foundational knowledge about psychology and counseling and about the human psyche. Again, stepping stones to where I am. But now, I marry that with this profound knowledge that I found about the spiritual, energetic presence, about your own field. And what I've realized is that we can choose to let go of and stop agreeing to those negative emotions that we used to have present in our field. You have an energy around you that orbits you at all times. Your energetic field sits about 3 meters outside of your body and you carry it. That's why you can feel people's energy. They can feel yours when you walk in a room or when you come near them. And what you feel is this a match to my field or not a match to my field? If you're carrying around that old energy of fear and regret and shame, your density is going to be really, really low. And if you come in contact with someone that is like that, you're going to feel an attraction to that. That's why you've attracted people like that in your past. But now, just like me, as we go through this awakening, I realized that the marriage that I was in was no longer a fit. And it's not that it's right or wrong. He's not right or wrong. We just had different spiritual paths. We were no longer an energetic match to each other. And it's okay for you to evolve past somebody. Now, of course, I do believe in marriage and would love to see it all work and love to see people heal and grow together. But you will know very clearly as you continue to awaken like I did, if there's a person, and they will feel it too, that you're just no longer in alignment anymore. And contrary to the church's teachings, it's okay to end a relationship contract because you've just evolved to different places. So each of you can go and find the lives that are more of a match to where you are on an evolutionary conscious level. I'm gonna give you one more tip that's gonna be the game changer for you in your awakening journey. But before I give that to you, I wanna remind you, if you love this material as much as I do, hit the like button on this video. And if you want more of it, hit the subscribe button so you know when this leading edge content comes out. back to the video. I want to leave you with this loving, wonderful piece of inspiration. Number one, you are not crazy. If you're going through this, I know that it feels like it because everyone's not going to be in alignment with you. Some of the teachings that you've learned, you're kind of unlearning and recreating. You're not going crazy. You're just reforming your life. And in that reformation, that reforming, there is a stage of deconstruction, and it can be painful. It can be challenging, but I promise you, if you just keep going, keep asking for Source to show you the next steps, you will find beautiful little miracles along your path. You start to find more signs and synchronicities. Those are the beautiful gifts that show up as you continue to raise your frequency, as the veil between you and Source gets thinner and thinner and thinner, and you and your miracles, the veil becomes thinner and thinner, and they start to show up in real time, because those are the surprises that your higher self and God knows that are going to be what you need to keep you going on the spiritual path so that you can live the life that you were meant to live, because you, my friend, are following your purpose. And the biggest thing that I want you to know along your pathway is that now that you've had your breakthrough, you are a limitless spiritual being here on earth having a beautiful human experience. So if you want more tips and tools and support along your spiritual awakening journey, what's happening is you're activating the rebel soul in you, and I have a free masterclass all about activating that rebel soul. You can jump into it at the link below, so click it, because I would love to have you in my tribe.